Live from Anderson Hall on the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Beyond the Arc, live on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu. Now, here's your host, Tommy Rezac, along with Reed Hunziker and Kellen Hebekin.
Final Four weekend at long last. Beautiful time of year. Opening day is Sunday. Masters is coming up. Great time of year for sports. And with that, we're glad you could be with us on Beyond the Arc, whether you're listening live this morning on KRNU2 or on the podcast on YouTube.com. Glad you could join us. I'm Tommy Rezac. Reed and Kellen are out. Reed should stop by later. I actually just got a text from him saying he might, what's he say? He says he could call in for a hockey segment. Do we let him?
I don't know.
We'll see. Yeah, hockey, the Stanley Cup's coming up in a couple of weeks. Fun time of year. Tommy Rezac, Zach Penrice across the studio. Once again, Kellen is out for his internship, so we'll give him a free pass for today. But glad you could join us. Lots to talk about this week, this weekend, this morning on this show. 90 minutes in store. We're going to start it off with opening headlines, the D'Angelo Russell saga, the latest on Colin Kaepernick, and then coming up at 10:45, Connor Happer from 93.7 The Ticket joins us to talk Husker spring football. Jordan Westerkamp out for the spring. What does that mean? How should we be worried? We'll talk about that with Connor and much more. A lot of Patrick O'Brien talk, of course. Final Four weekend, like I said, we've got Syracuse, North Carolina, Nova, and Oklahoma. And most of you probably know the NCAA academic fraud investigation going on with UNC, and then obviously Jim Boeheim's troubled past with the NCAA. How does that affect this Final Four? How will we perceive it with all of that going on? We'll talk about that after the 11 o'clock hour. Zach, by the way, is making a big debut this weekend. He is going to be calling Nebraska baseball tonight on BTN Plus, and you can watch that with the BTN Plus subscription. We'll talk more about that later on in the show, but lots to get to. Let's not waste any more time. Let's start it off with opening headlines. Lots to get to in the D'Angelo Russell saga. Some funny tweets from NFL players, past and present. We'll get to that in a little bit. But first, Colin Kaepernick, and we've probably, or you, the fans, have probably heard a lot about his future. Colin Kaepernick's $11.9 million base salary is guaranteed for 2016, while ESPN's Adam Schefter says Kaepernick should be with the 49ers at least in the early part of this month. Trade talks regarding the quarterback are expected to continue through the NFL draft, which is coming up at the end of April the 28th through the 30th. Now, all signs are pointing to Kaepernick going to the Broncos to compete with Mark Sanchez for that starting spot. So I ask you, Zach, is Kaepernick a good fit for the Broncos?
Well, that'd be a complete change of the guard now, wouldn't it, in Denver? I mean, you're talking about switching your offense from a Peyton Manning style to a Colin Kaepernick style, so that's a complete 180 as far as what you do offensively and what you do as a team. But I think Kaepernick, he doesn't want to be in San Francisco anymore. So, I think the 49ers should use that.
Who does want to be in San Francisco right now? Literally.
It's an exciting time there, or at least it could be. You got Chip Kelly coming in. So, I know that you disagree with that, but there's a lot of guys that want to get out of there. And, of course, Colin Kaepernick is one of them.
That's what I'm saying.
So.
Kelly's your coach, and people are heading for the exits. It's hard to get excited.
Right. So, I don't know. I think that Denver is an interesting fit for him. I think that him going to compete there with Mark Sanchez, I would not see that as a competition. I think Mark Sanchez is not their starter. I don't think they plan on him being their starter. I think Denver is going to get somebody, and whether that's Colin Kaepernick or not, it's really up in the air. But I do not think Mark Sanchez is their starter, and if Colin Kaepernick goes to Denver, he probably is going to be starting all 16 games for him in the regular season this year.
Yeah, and I'm friends with a lot of Denver fans. There's quite a bit of them here in Lincoln, and I've heard they said, I don't know, maybe Mark Sanchez is the guy. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Colin Kaepernick, with the right coach, with Jim Harbaugh, went to the Super Bowl. Few other coaches can do that. With the right coach, Kaepernick can be good.
Right.
And now I'm not saying Kubiak could take Kaepernick to the Super Bowl, but when Kaepernick has the right leadership, he can be good, and he can do good things. So that's one thing that I always look to.
Well, and he has the tools in Denver.
Yeah.
100% he's got him there. He's got Emmanuel Sanders. He's got Demaryius Thomas to throw the ball to. You have a wide receiver core that is second to none as far as the NFL goes. And then when you turn the ball over or when you have to go 3 and out or something, you got that Denver defense, which is arguably the best in the NFL, there to back you right up. So I think that there's a lot of incentives besides just money and wanting to leave San Francisco that are there for Kaepernick. So it'll be interesting to see. I think I could easily see the 49ers striking a deal during the draft as far as trading a pick for Kaepernick or trading some picks for him. Whether it happens sooner rather than later remains to be seen, but we'll just have to see what happens. And it'll be a very interesting month. Besides just the Kaepernick saga, it'll be a very interesting month in the NFL.
Yeah, a lot of different trades going on. Who was it? Vernon Davis going to the Redskins. That was reported yesterday, so that was pretty interesting. So, yeah, I mean, as you know, Broncos, they lost Osweiler to the Texans. The Broncos had less than $2.9 million, though. Less than $2.9 million available in salary cap space. That ranks 28th worst in the NFL. And the Niners, meanwhile, they have $53 million in cap space. That's the second most. And recent reports earlier in the spring, back in this past month in March, had the Broncos valuing Kaepernick as a fourth rounder in a trade. But Denver does not have a fourth-round pick that can be traded in this year's draft after they sent their original fourth-round selection to the Ravens in a trade for Gino Gradkowski, who's a center from Baltimore. So it's interesting. I mean, you got to wonder, what is Denver going to give San Francisco in return? I mean, a lot of people thought he was valued as a fourth-round pick. Denver doesn't have a fourth-round pick to trade. So we'll see where Gary Kubiak, John Elway, and the crew decides to go with that. Moving on, Lakers rookie D'Angelo Russell offered an apology one day after ESPN reported a rift between he and Nick Young. This rift developed after Russell videotaped Young answering questions about being with another woman other than his fiancée, Iggy Azalea, who are supposed to get married in June. When asked about this in a press conference Wednesday, D'Angelo basically said he is sick about the whole thing. He regrets it. Let's see, here's a quote. "I've always been known as a guy that plays around a lot, and he has been too. To be around somebody that's that similar with the same characteristics, it's different. He's one of the guys that I've always talked to about anything, and I cherish our friendship. For me to have an incident like this come up and put in jeopardy is not what I was intending to do." Well, what were you intending, D'Angelo Russell? I don't know, Zach. Does D'Angelo deserve forgiveness this early for this whole mess?
No way. I mean, I don't understand the logic behind it, what he's thinking when he's in a scenario like that. It's just like, I'm going to record this guy admitting that he's cheating on his fiance. There is no logic to it. But you got to keep in mind, I mean, he's a 19-year-old kid. This guy is my age, and he's in the NFL
right.
as a rookie, or he's in the NBA as a rookie. So I mean, and he's been known through the Lakers organization as kind of being a little immature for his age. Sometimes, I mean, I saw some quotes saying that he acts like he's almost 14 at times. So I mean, he still doesn't have that maturity level, obviously, at this point. But the question was, does he deserve forgiveness? And at this point, no. And he even admits that. I don't understand if he doesn't forgive me or the apology's not accepted. So I mean, it is a ridiculous debacle going on right now, and he is probably the least trusted person in the entire NBA right now.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine how the locker room feels about him right now. I mean, he's dividing the locker room. It's drama, and the Lakers have already had a disastrous season. And for Kobe's farewell season to be somewhat overshadowed by this is kind of a shame as well. And props to Young for Nick Young for handling this pretty well. He was asked about it, and he said, I think it's best me and D'Angelo handle it in a private manner outside the media. I think it's something we need to sit down and talk about. What happened is happened. We've got to work on it. So Nick Young was asked about it. He was pressured about it. He just said, we'll talk about it. We'll move on. So props to Nick Young for at least handling this maturely. And again, it's tough because you hope what D'Angelo recorded isn't true, but at the same time, is that any of D'Angelo Russell's business? And why is D'Angelo Russell being an instigator? I mean, it's just not necessary. So before we move on to our last opening headline, I saw this on CBS Sports last night. Past and present NFL people tweeting about D'Angelo Russell. I said he would divide the locker room. Well, that's kind of what these tweets were about. Terrence Knighton tweeted the other day, D'Angelo Russell lucky he ain't in a football locker room. Chris Baker from the Redskins, D'Angelo Russell, SMH. That's what can break up a team. Don't think he could come to work if he was in an NFL locker room. And this one really gets me, Zach. Tyrann Mathieu, pot calling the kettle black here. You ain't real. No matter how much money you make, You a corn dog. Tyrann Mathieu. I think he has to work on himself a little bit before he's calling other people out. And then finally, Le'Veon Bell, the Michigan State grad and current Steeler. D'Angelo Russell and that one chick in the same boat with me. I hope the Lakers stop passing him the ball for real. So there you have it. D'Angelo Russell and Nick Young. I think Kobe Bryant, I think, also had a quote for this. He just said, it's just something we're going to have to work through. Yeah, here's what he said. I had the chance to talk to D'Angelo earlier. All I can do is my best Yoda impersonations and give him that kind of sage advice. One day this shall pass, or something like that, end quote. So Kobe Bryant, not too worried about what a rookie is doing. I mean, Kobe Bryant, it's his last season in the NBA. He's just trying to enjoy it. I don't think he's too worried about what 19-year-old rookie D'Angelo Russell is doing. So we'll continue to follow that and see what happens next. But I think the best thing for the Lakers and for everybody is just to kind of just forget about it and just not give D'Angelo the attention he's clearly seeking. All right, well, one last thing in Major League Baseball, and then we're going to move on to some spring football in the next segment. Baseball's opening day, Sunday and Monday, in MLB preseason rankings that came out yesterday. The Chicago Cubs stand alone at the number 1 spot, followed by the Royals at number 2 and the Giants at number 3. A couple things here, Mr. Penrice. What's your favorite thing about opening day, first? And second, will the Cubs be everything they're advertised, or is this hype a little premature?
Well, opening day, I mean, there's nothing else like it, in my opinion. I mean, it's the start of such a long season. It's the longest season in sports, basically. And I mean,
that or NASCAR, they're both about 9 months.
They're both very, very long in that. It's so opening day for a lot of teams is just a huge celebration. I mean, there's cities such as, I know for a fact, Cincinnati, they get to host their opening day game every single year because it's a huge party. Mm-hmm. The city shuts down, everyone gets work off, and everyone goes to the game, or everyone goes down around the ballpark, and it's just an all-day party. And so there is nothing like it. It's almost as if it's a playoff atmosphere. Every stadium is full. Baseball's back, and the environment is, there's nothing else like it, Tommy. There just really isn't.
All right, and Chicago Cubs, do they go to the World Series? What do you think?
I think no. I think the hype is there. I think that they are going to be a very good team. I think they're going to the NLCS, but I think they're going to fall short once again. They're not there yet, in my opinion. I think that this is a team that will be in the World Series in the next 5 years, but I do not think this year is the year for them yet. I know the hype is I know everyone's really high on them this year. But the NL Central, they're coming in such a tough division.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And and I do think they have a good chance to win that division, but then
I mean, the Cardinals do too.
I mean, the Cardinals are there every year. I mean, exactly. And then you're talking like a city like Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's almost
Pirates,
a guarantee to be in the NL wildcard game, like they are every year.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, for Chicago, they're going to have to go through St. Louis to get there. They're going to have to go through maybe the Mets again, or the Nationals, or even Pittsburgh again. They're going to have to beat some very good NL teams to get back to the World Series if they want to finally get back there.
Yeah, and you look at the talent that the Cubs have: Jason Hayward, Ben Zobrist, John Lakey. That's who they acquired during the offseason. They're deep on basically every part of the roster. NL Manager of the Year Joe Madden entering his second year as manager. Rookie of the Year Chris Bryant comes back. Cy Young winner Jake Arrieta, who's probably one of my favorite pitchers in the major leagues to watch. And then top 5 finisher in MVP voting, Anthony Rizzo, who is an all-star in every sense of the word. To quote ESPN, they're solid all around the diamond and boast the 4th best farm system in baseball, according to ESPN's Keith Law, which should allow them to acquire a major piece at the trade deadline if needed. So yeah, if they hit a slump mid-season, if they're not quite where they want to be, they can probably get a pretty good trade. And not that, in my opinion, not that they really need it at the current moment. But you mentioned some of the Cubs' weaknesses. If the workload of some hurlers from last season catches up with them, combined with a key injury or two, the Cubs could be in trouble. Last year, Jake Arrieta threw 72 1/3 innings more than his previous career high. And then John Lester, who turned 32 in January, also made every start last year. Most of this is good news unless age or wear and tear catches up with them. That's kind of the big question right now. And Chicago's strong bullpen could still be viewed as vulnerable, considering the Cubs are counting on several key contributors who don't really have a long track record of success. So pretty young bullpen. If you're going to look to anything that the Cubs might be weak at, it might be the bullpen. That is it for opening headlines. By the way, Yankees and Astros Monday. Really excited about that. And Tanaka is going to be starting, which is good news for us Yankees fans. But more on that in our final segment. We'll take a break. When we come back, Connor Happer. He is the co-host of Morning Take on 93.7 The Tick, and he's been out at spring practice. What he told me every day, Yes, last night I asked him, you want to talk spring ball? Have you been out there? He's like, yep, every single practice. So we're going to get Connor's insight on what's going on the Husker practice field, and then after that we'll talk Final Four, Husker baseball, all of that and more. Really packed show. Glad you could be with us. Don't go anywhere. Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
Don't go anywhere. Beyond the Arc returns right after this break on KRNU2, live on the web at krnu.unl.edu.
From Anderson Hall on UNL campus in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska, this is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome back in. It's Beyond the Arc. Tommy Rezac and Zach Penrice with you on Friday morning, live on KRNU2, or whether you're catching us on the podcast on youtube.com. Glad you could be with us on this Friday. Nebraska spring football in full swing right now. The spring game coming up in just, 2 weeks from tomorrow, the April 16th. So it's going to be exciting. So a few more practices to get to. The Huskers were back on the field for the first time since spring break this week. And joining us to talk about all of that from 93.7 The Ticket, you can hear him every weekday morning from 6 to 8 a.m. on Morning Take with Jake Sorensen. It's Connor Happer, a veteran of the KRNU airwaves. Connor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's going well this morning. Glad you could be with us to talk spring football. Lots to get to, so we're going to dive right in. So like I said, the football team back on the field this week for the first time since their 11-day break. Second practice of the week yesterday, and Danny Langsdorff spoke to the media. Jordan Westerkamp out for the spring. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But a big thing he touched on was the quarterback competition, mainly for the number 2 spot, seeing as Armstrong still kind of a lock for the starting position. So as far as that number 2 quarterback spot, with you got Patrick O'Brien, Riker Fife, AJ Bush, a lot of bodies competing for this spot. How do you see that backup quarterback race stacking up right now?
Well, I mean, right now it's hard to go away from anybody else but Riker Fife. He's been the guy. I think the staff's mentality on the whole thing is, if he could do enough, if you feel comfortable with putting him in that situation, you don't have to use Patrick O'Brien this year. You don't really have to burn a red shirt on him. But one thing Danny Langsdorff did say yesterday was, yeah, we're going to let these guys compete for it all the way throughout. Now, Riker has been working with the top 2 teams. They call it the Husker team. So that's the top 2 units there. And A.J. Bush and Patrick O'Brien are working with basically scout team, 3rd and 4th teams at this point. And you haven't seen any movement among those guys yet as far as anybody jumping up and working with other teams. So you have to take that into account here. But I like what I've seen from Patrick O'Brien. He can certainly make a run at this thing. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out when they come back over the summer, and definitely the spring game will be a big-time showcase for all those guys. But it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out as we head closer to fall camp. But I wouldn't count Patrick O'Brien out yet.
Sure, yeah. More on Patrick O'Brien in just a little bit. Getting to the second bigger story of yesterday, Jordan Westerkamp has been battling that groin injury. He and Stanley Morgan have kind of been battling injury. Stanley came back this week. I heard he was pretty solid, looked to be himself. But yeah, Jordan Westerkamp out for the spring with a groin injury. Now, I don't think so personally, but is this anything to worry about if you're a Husker fan?
No, it doesn't seem like it. But apparently he did have some sort of procedure done. And I've actually been – I don't want to start any rumors there, but I've actually heard that he went to, Germany and had some weird procedure done on that groin. So that's something that's out there right now. I can't confirm that, but that's something that's been floating around a little bit. But I think he had some sort of procedure done, which at first it seemed like, he wasn't going to have anything done on that groin, and it didn't seem like a very serious thing. But so apparently he had something done, but no. And Keith Williams said yesterday it's really nothing to be worried about. Danny Langsdorff kind of echoed those thoughts as well. I don't think so at this point, but what's doing right now is the same thing. I mean, you saw Stanley Morgan jump into that role last year where everyone went down in spring and fall camp, and Stanley Morgan was kind of just the last guy left standing. Well, it's kind of happening the same way again this year with a guy like Darian Graham, or it's somebody else who could step up.
Levon Alston, I've heard too. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. So you got guys like that. It's just more opportunities for them, and the wide receivers have looked awfully strong as a unit.
Connor Happer from 93.7 The Ticket. He's on Morning Take every weekday morning, 6 to 8, joining us here on Beyond the Arc on the Nothing But Net hotline. Getting back to Patrick O'Brien real quick, Langsdorf said before the break around St. Patrick's Day or so that O'Brien looks ahead of schedule. He's proving to them what he looked like in high school. And I've heard this debate quite a bit on The Ticket, whether at Welch's show, on Gaskins, or on Morning Take. I'm not up that early that often, but I've heard you guys talk about it a little bit. I've heard this debate a lot, and you've mentioned, Langsdorf might just throw him into the fire and let him compete. But in your mind, if you were a coach, is it better to redshirt O'Brien, or do you let him compete right away? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this like a million times. I don't know. It's such a hard decision for me. I kind of lean toward just, if the guy is good enough to play, then let the guy play. If he's good enough to be that backup quarterback, or if he's even good enough to, compete for a starting role, and should Tommy Armstrong go down, then if you feel comfortable or more comfortable with him in the game than you do with Riker Fife in the game, then, that gives you a better chance to win that day and right now. So, but I can certainly see the advantages of having a red shirt on the guy. You want to have him for as much time as you possibly can, because like you said, he's certainly proved to be, the real deal, the truth. So it's a really hard decision. It's one that I think the coaching staff hopes that Riker Fife can, solidify that role and win that backup job. I think that's their hope, so they can probably have that red shirt on Patrick O'Brien. But if it doesn't work out that way, then they would have no problem putting Patrick O'Brien right behind Tommy Armstrong.
Yeah, and then Tanner Lee coming in next year will certainly make things interesting in the quarterback spot as well. Moving on to the roster, O'Brien, obviously, he's not the only new guy on this roster. From the open practices that you've seen and from what you've heard from the coaching staff, I've heard a few names like Levon Alston, Eric Lee Jr., the Davis twins, Alex and Carlos, Tanner Farmer on the offensive line. Those are some things that I've heard. But in your mind, what are some newer players or previously unknowns that kind of have been making an impression so far this spring?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned him earlier. Darion Grimm, he's the guy who's supposed to be supposed to be at prom right now, as Keith Williams always said. He's supposed to be a senior in high school, early enrolled with Patrick O'Brien. I think that guy's got a chance to make a difference this year. Levon Alston is another guy as well who might expect to see some playing time. He, left last year. He was going to redshirt last year anyway, but he tore his ACL in the fall, and he's recovered since then. So a couple wide receivers there. I really like Darion Grimm at that position, though.
Right.
And then you'll see a guy that we've been kind of waiting for on the offensive line, and that would be Gerald Foster, DJ Foster.
Yeah, that's a big one.
He's going to be sitting right there at that right guard. Our left guard. He's going to make a really good impression on. He's made so far a really good impression on this coaching staff. Mike Cavanaugh seems to think that he's brought an attitude change to the process, something he didn't have last year, and he's really got his head on straight this year. And that secondary, as you kind of mentioned a couple of guys from it, Eric Lee is definitely one of them. He's kind of that third cornerback right now. That's a position group to really, really watch out for. You got Avery Anderson's been working at that second safety, and then Aaron Williams came back this week from his meniscus injury. So you have those two back there, along to go with Nate Gary, who, he's not going to jump out and surprise anybody, but he can really get back to his all-conference performance style this year, as we were kind of missing last year. So if he can get back to that, and then you throw on maybe a Lamar Jackson come fall, when that comes around, you're going to be set with a pretty good unit there. It's the defensive backs. Yeah,
and from what I watched in the bowl game and late last year, I'm really excited to watch Chris Jones take the field again. I was really impressed with him late in the year. Connor Happer on 93.7 The Ticket is our guest here on Beyond the Arc. Turning to recruiting now, Connor, Nebraska's top quarterback target for 2017, Tristan Gebbia. He and Keyshawn Johnson were in town Tuesday. They took in the Nebraska baseball game with Creighton, took in some of Tuesday's practice, and they're good friends. They're high school teammates at Calabasas High. Now, this was kind of a story a week or two ago when Keyshawn committed, but kind of going back to that, how big of an impact does Keyshawn's recruitment have on the program going forward? I mean, could we be looking at a lot more players like Tristan from Calabasas or that California area? With Keyshawn's recruitment, does that flock more California talent?
Oh, yeah. His ability to peer recruit is like nobody that I've ever seen before. He is shutting it down right now. He's all about Nebraska, and I saw a couple back and forths with him and his 5-star teammate, Darnay Holmes, on Twitter. hey, man, I'm not talking to you unless your tweet says something about Nebraska or Go Big Red or a corn emoji or something like that. So his ability to get other guys, and these guys have really built friendships. You talk about a guy like him and Javon McQuitty from Columbia, Missouri. You're thinking to yourself, how do these guys know each other? Well, I mean, they've been at camps together. They met each other at the spring game last year.
Mm-hmm.
They decided, you know what, we're going to start something here. And that's how it really gets the ball rolling with a couple of these guys. And if you get Jebbia and the ball will continue to roll, and then hopefully the grand prize is kind of Darnay Holmes, it seems like at this point. They're on the right track for him as well, it seems like.
Yeah, should be interesting to watch for this 17 class as we move closer to the next signing day. Should be a fun summer and fall as well. Just a couple more questions here with Connor Happer. Turning back to the current roster, another race that catching a lot of attention is the running backs. Obviously, a lot of people like Devine Ozigbo, what he was able to do in his playing time in the Foster Farms Bowl. So I guess the big question for you is, do you think Devine is the guy, or does Terrell Newby and Mikhail Wilbon have a pretty big say in this yet?
It's so up in the air. And
right.
Reggie Davis, the running backs coach, hasn't really anointed anybody. I don't think he's going to. And Daniel Langsdorff was kind of along the same path. It's just going to be – it's similar to the deal we saw last year. I think Nebraska has a pretty good problem when it comes to the running back situation. I think we all want consistency. Like, we all want the number one guy to just run for, 1,200 some yards or something like that. But this doesn't seem like that's going to happen for Nebraska. They don't have the guy who really steps out among the other ones. But they like Terrell Newby. I know some people around here aren't necessarily huge fans of his running style, but they absolutely like what he can bring to the table as a total package. Catches the ball out of the backfield and blocks pretty well as far as pass protection. Ozigbo, you mentioned him, and then Mikhail Wilbon. They're looking for him to step up this year. Mm-hmm. If there was one shot at a home run type of back, a guy who could maybe carry the load, it's Mikhail Wilbon. But he's got to figure out what he's doing as far as the plays and the playbook. That was the big problem for him last year. He's got to get his head straight. There's no question his work ethic as far as the physical side of it for Wilbon. He just has to figure out how to get the plays down, get the playbook down, and figure it out on the mental side for him.
Sure. And before I get to the last question dealing with wide receivers, I just want to say I like Devine Ozigbo. I mean, I didn't think, I was saying about every week, I don't think he got enough snaps. In the games he played, he was phenomenal. I mean, Illinois, he was clearly the Nebraska MVP. Even Purdue, he got like 3 carries and ran it for about 10, 15, 20 yards a pop. Played phenomenal against UCLA. I know UCLA doesn't have a great front seven, not a great run defense, but to me, Devine kind of reminds me, I don't want to get people too excited, but Devine kind of reminds me of Melvin Gordon. He's big, he's fast, he can pass protect, and he can hit a crease pretty well. So I really like Devine Ozigbo. You said if you wanted to put a lot, let me back up. You said if people were going to put stock in a home run type of guy, it's Wilbon, and I get that. Wilbon is really quick. I'd say maybe Wilbon could turn a corner a touch quicker, but if you're talking full package, pass pro, physicality, size, and speed, to me, Ozigbo's the guy. But, I mean, that's just my opinion.
And that's kind of what they're looking for. That's why they like Ozigbo so much. They love that complete package type of deal, and that's why they like Terrell Newby so much. He was for his whatever he lacks as far as running the ball, he picks up in catching the ball out of the backfield and pass protecting. So, and that's extremely important. If you can't pass protect, you're not going to play on the team. So, as much as people don't like to hear that, that's kind of the way it's going to be. So, they love the complete package idea, and they definitely do like Devine Ozigbo too.
Yeah, will be a fun race to watch in the spring game, no doubt about it. All right, one last question for you. Talking about the wide receivers, heard a lot about these guys lately. A lot of people are saying that these receivers on the current team could be the best in school history. That includes Mitch Sherman at ESPN. He wrote an article about this week. When you're talking Jordan Westerkamp, Stanley Morgan, Pearson L., Brandon Riley, Alonzo Moore, Ethan Carter, on and on and on. Really dangerous bunch. With that being said, is this the best receiving core in the Big Ten?
Mitch Sherman did write a little thing about that yesterday. He had Michigan as a little bit better.
Right.
They have a couple of first-team guys, including what's the guy's name? Jay Chesson and Jake Butt.
Jake Butt, that's a big one. Yeah.
Jake Butt is the guy who really separated them from Nebraska in Mitch Sherman's eyes. But I mean, it's hard to get outside of that window of Nebraska, but you know what? This is as good as the wide receiver unit as I've seen, as deep as a wide receiver unit as I've seen. It's going to be hard. We were just talking about it this morning. It's going to be hard. We talk about how Nebraska hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver in their school history. It's going to be hard to feed all those mouths. I don't know if they get it just based on that, but you got Westerkamp, like you said. You got Pearson LV returns healthy enough. You got Riley, and you got throwing guys like Morgan, throwing guys like Alonzo Moore, Darian Grimm, Zach Darlington, maybe.
Yeah, Zach Darlington, the old quarterback, yeah.
So who knows, And then on top of that, you got Stephen Carter. But it's as good and as deep of a unit, definitely, that I've seen in Nebraska since I've, paid attention to the program, which has been a while now.
Yeah.
So, it looks really, really good, and that's where, the questions start to come in. You want to run the ball a little bit better. You want to run the ball a little bit heavier. But you have those weapons on the outside that you really have to get the ball to, too.
Yeah, and you said, since you've been following the program, could be the best group. The second best group that I think of was probably 06, 07 when it was Mo Purify, Nate Swift, Todd Peterson. Really great group in that Callahan era. That's kind of what I'm drawing this comparison to. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, but I think back then there weren't as many, young guys waiting in the wings to me. I mean, yeah, this year it's you've got your starters who are really, really good, and then you've got guys even a Brady Peltzer who've been coming up through the rankings and doing some good things. So really, really fun group to watch, I think, this spring and going into fall. Connor, sadly we're out of time, but covered quite a bit there. Thanks for joining us this morning. And I got to ask, I know you're a Creighton basketball fan. Are you as big a Creighton baseball fan? Because if so, that was a pretty disappointing outing for the Blue Jays the other night.
Yeah, no, not really. That's the one that's kind of changed since I've been here in Lincoln. It's actually, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily changed, but I've always paid attention to both,
right?
Pretty heavily. It's not like I dislike either of them. I like them both. So
sure,
they compete in different conferences. They do play 3 times a year, which is a lot of fun.
Sure.
Nebraska's had the upper hand in that thing for the better part of 3 years now. I think they've won 8 in a row.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I feel like it should be. Nebraska should just probably beat Creighton in baseball, but Creighton jumps up every once in a while. But no, there's no. I like them both.
Oh, okay, that's fair. And I gotta say, hats off to Creighton for the NIT run. I was actually kind of following that over spring break. Admirable season, and should be interesting when Nebraska and Creighton hit the hardwood again next year. Connor, yeah, it'll be a fun time. Connor, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you bet, guys. Thanks.
Connor Happer from 93.7 The Ticket. Again, you can hear him every weekday morning from 6 to 8 a.m. on Morning Take with Jake Sorensen on The Ticket. And Zach, before we go to break, just any reaction to spring football at this point?
Well, I think he made a lot of very good points, Tommy, but the main thing that kept on coming to my mind during all that was, you talk about a wide receiver core that's potentially the best in Nebraska history, and then the thing that kept on coming to my mind, and if you're a typical Nebraska football fan, you're thinking the same thing: who's going to throw them the ball? You're talking about one of the most inconsistent quarterback performances I have ever seen in college football last year in Tommy Armstrong as far as throwing the football. Yeah. He had a lot of even on his good days, he was underthrowing balls and receivers were making great plays. And so it's Tommy Armstrong has got to be a new Tommy Armstrong. He's got to be calm, cool, and collected back there in the pocket. He's got to be the dual threat guy that they know he can be. The coaching staff, I think that they have a deeper quarterback arsenal this year, so they got to be more aggressive with Tommy Armstrong. Tommy Armstrong.
Love it.
As far as running the football, so I think that he needs to run more, and that would make it so he has a lot more time in the pocket, I believe. So he's just got to make sure that his throws are on time and precise to these receivers, and he's got to limit his interceptions this year. And I just think the job is almost definitely his this year. It's his job to lose. So I think that Tommy Armstrong has just got to be a whole new version of himself this year, and he's got to be the leader of this team.
That's football. Charles, that's football. What is he supposed to do?
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing I want to leave on is that, everyone wants this Nebraska offense to have that identity they showed in the UCLA game, run heavy and then, only have Tommy pass it 20 times a game. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I am too.
Because, that's what people want. And Nebraska, as me and Connor were talking, a lot of good running backs. And as we've seen with Northwestern, Wisconsin, Iowa, a run-heavy offense is what, brings you success in the Big Ten West. And I think that's what people want to see. Yeah. Mike Riley said he wants a more run-heavy offense. So then the big question becomes, if Tommy's only throwing the ball about 20 times a game like he was recruited to do, then you wonder, all these good receivers going to go, underused maybe.
And I think they need to change their identity a little bit offensively. I think they need to go, and I do like the idea of a run-heavy offense,
sure.
and I like the idea of short throws. I think that Tommy is not the greatest guy as far as it comes to throw.
To me, that's been his biggest Achilles heel, just hitting a check down.
And there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten, so what's wrong with holding the football for a longer amount of time when you're on offense? Yeah. I like screens to Jordan Westerkamp. I like end-arounds to DeMornay Pearson-El.
Stanley Morgan.
I like having a possibility of having 3 different running backs in the game on the same drive.
Yeah.
At one point, I like Tommy doing quarterback bootlegs where he keeps it. So
and we all love a fullback trap.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you're talking about a new guy, Harrison Jordan, taking over that job this year. So I mean, there's if they keep varying what they can do offensively, the amount of things they can do is limitless.